What's up guys, Yannick Reed here and welcome back to the channel. When looking for a new camera, there's so many numbers to consider, and a lot of these new cameras have these boxes about 4K, 6K and 8K on them. If you've ever wondered what they mean, I'm gonna give you a brief breakdown as to why 4K isn't such a big deal right now. One of their first factors, if video is involved, they talk about 4K. This camera shoot 4K? If it's 4K this and 4K that. As of recently, 4K has become quite a buzzword in the video industry. All these Ks, 8K, rave. And I kind of want to assert the fact that 4K isn't the most important factor considering a camera. Let's just briefly break down what 4K is. Most of what you watch nowadays is at 1080p. You're probably familiar with that. And 1080p is 1920 by 1080 pixels. So just imagine a square, and one side is 920 pixels and the other side is 1080 pixels. 4K now, which is known as Ultra HD, 2160 pixels by 3840. A lot of people think that 4K is better, it's bigger, but I'm sure maybe in your life you may have gotten a poster or a picture and you have this huge poster and you look at it and you say, this is a really pixelated poster, and you may have like a really small photo and you say the quality in this photo is good. What I'm trying to allude to is bigger isn't necessarily better. There are cases in which there are large prints that are very high quality, and there are cases in which there are large prints that are very poor quality. For example, an iPhone shoots 4K and this camera shoots 4K, but it's not the same 4K that's coming out of the respective cameras. The 4K coming out of my mirrorless camera is not necessarily the 4K that's coming out of a cinema camera. Advertising will fail to go into this detail and use 4K as a buzzword as to why you should buy something. What you should focus on is what kind of quality or codec is the camera putting out. Some cameras can shoot what you would call a profile, meaning a style of image that is flatter, which allows you to do more things to the footage in post, color it or add effects and stuff like that. And maybe smaller consumer cameras will shoot an image that looks good but is very compressed and is kind of more of a finished output. You're not really supposed to do a lot to it. Right now on my vlog, pretty much every single vlog or almost every video that you'd find on this channel, I've shot it in 1080p. 1080p is still pretty much the standard most viewing happens. Your phone, it may be higher than 1080p, but most of the streaming happens at 1080p. When you go to the movies in the theaters, most theaters are showing things at 1080p. Most shows are at 1080p. I know Netflix has now introduced 4K streaming, but a lot of people's internet speed hasn't really caught up to the speeds needed to stream 4K properly. A lot of you who are beginning out now in cinematography may not have the computer power to edit 4K at its best. Most cameras that shoot 1080 will shoot 1080 at a faster frame per second than 4K. We can go into frames per second in another video, but essentially frames per second is the ability to slow down video footage later in post. You are on a budget, I wouldn't put 4K as a real priority when getting a new camera. And I don't think the average user, say if you're doing vlogs or you're just doing basic video mostly and just some light edits, you may find that you don't use 4K. I personally rarely use 4K. I'm normally buying more expensive cameras for other features other than 4K. 4K isn't that big of a deal, and don't worry if you don't have it. That's it for today's episode and education. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, like it, share it with someone who is obsessed with 4K. Until the next video, I'd love for you to just bless up yourself.